And okay, well, they may not win the general, but they're out there.
So a few things. First, on the data center build out, there's been a bunch of segments all over the network about how successful it's been in Loudoun County, Virginia, like one of the wealthiest counties in the country, what it's done for them in terms of lowering property taxes and lowering energy costs for the area. And the entire people pushing this data center build out have just failed in their marketing approach and talking about, they're like, oh, well, we can't lose to China. Well, you know what, if I'm struggling to pay my bills and I, detest the billionaires and the trillionaires of the world, I don't care about losing to China, I care about me. And so that needs to improve there. But in terms of El Said and Bernie Sanders, all of these are just talking points. This is just a narrative to feed into. And it's been focus grouped that these data centers are very unpopular, so we're going to rail against them, we're going to ban against them. It's not about the consequences, it's about pushing a narrative to acquire power. And so everything that the Democrats push is like, look, it's the rich people that are causing your pain. And I'm going to do something about this to help your life get better. And the Republicans need to do a better job. Be like, hold on, it's the government causing your pain, and we're going to do everything we can to reduce the size of government. And, let me show you this fact pattern as to why it is the government, and you giving the government more power, that's like giving the arsonist like the fire extinguisher. So you really need to do a better job of communicating this, because these people, whether they want to take control of everything, these are not like in a world of makers and takers. These are 100% takers. These people who've never accomplished anything in the private sector. They just want more government power, and they'll use whatever narrative they can to get it.
And people are angry, and so they're seizing on that anger and that frustration that's out there. And when people are making decisions, voting decisions, futures market this morning rebounding after a sell-off, but for the week, market's down substantially. It's yields that are a problem and oil prices that are a problem, and wondering what the Fed is going to do with interest rates.
Yeah, look, Scott Bessent stepped in with kind of a new version of Operation Twist to address the rising interest rates on the back end of the curve. So I think that there's a lot more firepower that the Treasury can do to go ahead and address these concerns. I do not think a rate hike from the Fed will do anything to address the memory shortage for chips for artificial intelligence or lower the price of a barrel of oil. And that is primarily where the inflationary pressures are coming from, given that the deficit growth has the deficit growth has dramatically reduced under this administration. So the additional money entering the money supply is not the primary cause of inflation as it was for most of this inflationary cycle. So I think these are good opportunities to get involved here. I think the Treasury Secretary also said yesterday that the military operations are close to nearing an end, and that this is going to be, they're going to unveil a large sanctions package not only to Iran on Monday, but a lot of their trading partners, and put pressure on them so that we could push something across. So I think these sell-offs create tremendous opportunities for investors that have cash to the sidelines.
Okay, and we have a soundbite from Scott Bessent talking about Treasury yields yesterday and the implications for this market. Can we hear that?
Anything that happens within a 24-hour period is noise. And, I think that once the market understands that we are focusing on fiscal consolidation and that we are trying to bring the market back into equilibrium in a thinly traded market, I think, I'm confident that bonds will continue declining.
Quick reaction, Mike.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with him more. This is not, August is not the highest volume month of the year. It's usually pretty much the lowest. Yeah. So this is what we refer to as a thin tape.
Okay, Dan, let's get to Moderna and Merck this morning. Both companies reported now aiming to match and potentially exceed the record size of SpaceX IPO. We all kind of saw how that went. It's still shaking out. A company seeing a surge in demand from investors, reporting $11.5 billion in second quarter revenue. The latest funding round in May saw that Anthropic's value hit $965 billion. The company could file to go public as soon as the end of the month. Your thoughts on this? Do you think the market is ripe for it, especially after SpaceX?
Yeah, look, we live in unbelievable times. Anthropic did $1 billion in revenue in 2024. This last month in July, they were at a $65 billion run rate, and that's expected to be close to a $100 billion annualized run rate by the end of this year. OpenAI did close to $7 billion in revenue in the month of July alone. These are the two fastest growing companies in human history. I think, we'll see where the valuation shakes out and the metrics behind it. But Anthropic could be at a $200 to $300 billion annualized run rate revenue by the end of next year. And I'm hearing rumors that Anthropic is already cash flow positive. So, yes, I think this is right for the IPO. I think this is what's fueling the growth and the demand in this country. And those naysayers for the AI revolution out there that are saying, where are the profits? Where's the ROI? Well, you can see it right in Anthropic.
Yeah.
So I think, look, I don't know about the long-term prospects of owning a large language model. I think Anthropic is your leader, and we may end up in a situation where you have like an Apple iOS and an Android where there's a lot of operating systems out there, a lot of large language models, and there's only one or two players that are really monetizing it. And I think right now Anthropic looks like it's going to in the lead with OpenAI right behind it.
All right, real quick on oil prices, Dan. We're down a sweater selling out. The popularity, the sort of pop culture backing against Luigi Mangione, trying to justify in some way what he did, that CEOs are bad, that healthcare is bad because it takes from people, they should be giving more, and somehow trying to make a justification for what happened here.
Yeah, look, I mean, this is just example 1 million, gazillion, billion of the cultural rot in our country. The fact that anyone, let alone vast quantities of people, would celebrate an executive getting shot on the street and the person that did it as some sort of cult hero is beyond imagination, right? And like this kind of all started, 10 years ago with the rise of Trump, in that the dehumanization of our political enemies, that the ends will always justify the means with the left. I mean, that is not a new concept, but it's absolutely disgusting that he would make that comment, because he's not an alleged killer. He's on video. He already pled guilty to charges on a federal level. That you would somehow celebrate it, somehow like giggle and laugh when you want to, if somebody asks you if they'd want to wear your clothes in a murder trial. Like, this is disgusting.
And also, where are the solutions, right? I don't think anyone thinks American healthcare is perfect. Look, we've all been through this experience, but ultimately, at the end of the day,
the issue is never the issue, because if the issue is the cost of healthcare, all this rage and eerie would be pointed at Obama and all the Democrats for destroying our healthcare system.
Right.
The issue is the revolution, and these are all false premises, just under the guise of creating a single-payer health system, giving the government total control of your entire life. So, like,
and this idea that we want Medicare for all, we don't have enough money, as you astutely pointed out before, to pay for it. Switching gears with you, Mike, Nvidia earnings out next week. Thoughts?
Yeah, look, I don't want to say the whole market hinges on this, but it's pretty close. Nvidia is at the center of this AI build-out with the GPUs that they're making that basically enabled artificial intelligence to be what it's become. There's so much riding on not only their earnings, not only their guidance, but how the call goes with Jensen Huang. Are they going to be able to sell chips into China? What's the price of memory going to look like? How is he going to raise guidance? How is he going to talk about the next 12 to 24 months and the build out? This is a $5 trillion company, but it is trading at the cheapest valuation from a forward PE multiple standpoint it has in the last decade. I think this is going to be fireworks. I would be a buyer of this into this call. And a buyer on any weakness.
All right. Now there's this. The FBI seizing the MacBook and phone of disgraced former Congressman Eric Swalwell. This happened over the weekend at a San Francisco airport. The former California rep coming under renewed scrutiny that the White House was releasing documents. Okay, Mike?
Yeah, look, none of this is news. None of this is new, okay? And Eric Swalwell stepped out of line and wouldn't get out of the gubernatorial race in California, and that's why he's facing these charges. It is a disgusting thing that they do, these members of Congress. These are not secrets. They've been sitting on this for forever, and it's only when you step out of line do these charges emerge.
All right, we'll leave it there on that conversation.
Well, look, it was a Democrat race, but Alexander Vindman raised like $20 million to like $500,000, and he lost the Senate primary. It's good that the Republicans are raising a lot of money. Unfortunately, you are running into a buzzsaw because this there was a lot of hype and hope around this administration to really address the cost of living and really start to reach out to the disaffected portions of the party, particularly young men, not just young white men, young black men, young Hispanics, and that coalition of the party that pushed Trump from, say, 46 to 52 to 53, they're just sitting out this primary season, all right? And the primary season in terms of turnout and the voter intensity is the largest gap in recent history by many multiples. And so you can talk, maybe the economy is going to get better. The economy was awesome in 2018, and the Republicans got crushed. This is going to be a bloodbath unless there is a dramatic change in messaging. And yes, you could talk about how bad socialism is and how bad communism is, but you can't win a race in a kind of wave election on saying, I'm not the other guy. You need to come with plans. And like the problem with this war is there's just so many people that have no interest. And if your goal of this administration was that I am going to reduce your cost of living and get you back to a better place, and then you go to a war which kind of goes against a lot of things that a lot of people want. It
raised prices.
And it raises prices. So, look, it's good that they have all this money. I think Joe Gruder's, the RNC, is doing a great job, but he's running into some real problems that he has no control over.
Well, they're running this midterm convention. It's going to be in Dallas. President.
Well, they at least have the weather in California that makes the destruction of like America, another one of America's great cities, a little bit more palatable. But like, look, what do you want? She's an incompetent communist, as if there's any other type. And like, what you have is these embedded grifts. So all of this campaign cash, it's just a way of stealing money from the taxpayer and putting it in the pockets of the political class, the consultants, for the ad buys, for the staffers, for the junkets. It's a disaster. And it's like California is littered with them up and down the coast. So this is not a unique problem to LA in terms of lighting money on fire.
Yeah.
But like, look, you could not have two more out-of-touch people, and it's a real shame that all those ballots appeared and took Spencer Pratt out of this race.
Well, and that's what I was just going to say. My expectation was that rates would move lower, and you know, that we might even see a 5.5% mortgage rate. Obviously, that didn't happen because of everything else that has happened as a result. But your thoughts on how people are feeling about this as we go into the midterms?
Yeah, the housing situation, I mean, you have a problem that was building from, basically 2008 to 2020. Household formation, household construction was at very depressed levels. You ran out of that excess supply 3 or 4 years before 2020, and then all of a sudden, 13 or 14 years of people, of families and people that didn't want to live in big homes flipped on a dime, wanted that big home with the white picket fence, and we're still reeling from that. You combine that with the excess government money printing, and you spike interest rates. So now you have a supply problem, you have an affordability problem, and you have a regulatory problem. And also the cost of materials is still too high to go out for mass development of housings. And you have to remember, it's not only the individual borrowing to buy the home that needs lower mortgage rates, it's the developers using leverage to go out and build them too. So this interest rate is a real problem. This housing affordability is a real problem. If that can get rectified over the next 12 to 24 months, and I think that you're going to see that from the Fed. You need the bank balance sheets to be loosened up a little bit more so they can add more mortgages to their balance sheet, and that gap between the 30-year fixed and the 10-year Treasury can continue to narrow. And if you can get that 10-year Treasury back down to 4% or sub 4% with that spread between the 10-year and the 30-year fixed mortgage, which is near all-time highs, if that can come in, all of a sudden these things will start to change very quickly. And that housing boom is a boom for everyone because the multiplier of mass housing construction, buying homes, plays to all different parts of the economy. So, look, Home Depot's earnings were pretty good this week. It's not falling off a cliff, but it is a problem that remains.
Okay, and Steve, I want to get to this.
Jackie, there is one thing that the government could do and Congress could do, and that Trump is really talking about that would have a big impact. I think you know where I'm going with
Reduce
this, which would be to. Well, the indexing of capital gains tax and
look, I'm surprised the president did this, but you got to take a step back and remember this whole Russiagate nonsense. Andrew Weissman ruined this guy's life. right, to try to get him to lie about President Trump. And they kept coming at him and coming at him and coming at him. And they got him to lie at a New York City court to make up all sorts of other garbage. And like, you know, when you hear about Todd Blanche not saying he's going to be his own institute of government, you need to just use Michael Cohen. Like, they will weaponize, they will ruin your life, they will threaten to throw your wife in jail because there's a debatable amount of value on your condo on your application for a refi. It is unbelievable what they did to Michael Cohen. After the fact, you know, I've never been under those circumstances. I like to think I would not turn on my friends the way that he did, but it's a little bit different when you're looking at jail for the rest of your life, complete financial ruin, and jail for your wife for a decade, with the weight of the federal government and the most corrupt prosecutor in federal government history, Andrew Weissman, breathing down your neck.
Yeah, I mean, you never really know what you'll do until you're in those shoes. But the fact, Tiana, that they're bonding over their shared experience.